Judges and courts play a crucial role in the direction our nation is heading. In recent history, we've seen a drift in America's courts and judges from what our founding fathers originally intended. So if we're going to be good, faithful stewards of the government that God has given us, then we need to have a clear understanding of what makes up a good judge. Joining me is Philip Jauregui. He's the Senior Counsel and Director of the Center for Judicial Renewal, which is an arm of AFA Action and was created to restore our judiciary to its original role. Mr. Jauregui, welcome to the Stand Radio.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you having me on.
Give us an overview of the kind of drift that we've seen in our courts from what our founders originally had in mind, if you would.
Sure. Well, and constitutionally, we just see what Article 3 of the Constitution says. And Article 3 is the article that creates and defines the role of the judiciary. And what it doesn't say is that they have legislative power. All legislative power under Article 1 is given to Congress, but the court has authority to decide cases. What that means, Jeff, is in any society, you have the lawmakers, the people who are making the rules that we live by. You have a police force, that's the executive, people that execute the law. But then the judiciary has a unique role. They don't enforce the law, they don't make the law, but they decide legal disputes between citizens or businesses based on the law passed by Congress. That is the role of the judiciary. And of course, we've seen in recent decades that the court has been exercising legislative power. That's a major problem that is being corrected right now, and it's being corrected in many ways through nominations to the court.
Yeah. We have a system in place that is supposed to vet judges and candidates for the Supreme Court. What kind of track record have members of Congress had actually when it comes to appointing good Supreme Court and federal judges?
What a great question, Jeff. And it's honestly a little bit tragic. The whole nominating to the Supreme Court process starts with presidents.
Okay.
Democrat presidents have gotten it right from their perspective about 100% of the time. In other words, Democrat presidents have known that they want activists on the court, and they get activists. When they put somebody on the court, they get it right about 100% of the time. Republican presidents, on the other hand, have gotten it right from their perspective about 50% of the time. So 50% of the time, a Republican president puts somebody on the Supreme Court, they remain faithful to the constitutional role. But about the other half of the time, Jeff, we've seen judges go on to the court and we're disappointed because they end up drifting to the left. They end up engaging in judicial activism and taking up duties or roles that the justices don't have constitutional power to execute.
Well, let's get to your organization. What's being done right now at the Center for Judicial Renewal to combat this judicial activism we've seen?
Yeah, so Jeff, we conservatives, constitutionalists, Christians, we're all three of those, Christians first, but we haven't taken a proactive role in judicial nominations in the past. Now, that's a general statement. I think some people probably have, but as a movement, what we've done is we've waited until there's a vacancy, we've sat back, and then when there's a vacancy, we sort of listen to hear who's being talked about for the court. Maybe 8 people are being talked about. Then we'll engage, research them, find those that are concerning, find those that are best. What we've done, Jeff, is change that and said, if we're not happy about the product, then we need to engage, and we need to engage early. We need to do our own research. We need to come up with our own list prayerfully and through research and not wait for someone else to hand us a list. They should do that. Every other group ought to be able to come up with their own list and their own research. But why weren't we doing that? Yeah. And I think it's because it was just a habit. It's sort of this habit that we went through. And also, it requires work far in advance, Jeff. You don't engage in that process when a vacancy occurs. If you want to be prepared for it, you have to approach it like AFA has approached it. We started this process 2.5 years ago. Yeah. It's a lot of work. It's thousands of hours of research to identify the best prospects. So that's what we've been doing.
Let's get into some of the research itself, because this is amazing and this is really fantastic in what you're doing. What kind of standards do you use to vet a potential federal judge?
Sure. Well, we can put it in probably 4 categories. One is to look and find out what is their judicial philosophy. What do they say about the role of the court? And that's very important. And we can get into the weeds on that, but It's what is their judicial philosophy? The second thing that we do, Jeff, is we look at their worldview. We do want to know, is this a person of faith? Is this person a Christian? Are they not a Christian? Now, anybody can be considered under the Constitution, but there's no reason that as Christians and constitutionalists that we shouldn't prefer people who share our worldview. And we do that because in a vacuum, it really wouldn't matter what a judge thought, because their role is not to make policy, it's to apply the policy of policymakers to cases. But practically, that's not how it's played out. Practically, people's worldviews do matter. We've even seen that recently. So that's part of what we look at. We look at their worldview. We look at what they believe about different issues that have come up before the court. The other thing that we look at their personal background too, where they've worked, where did they go to law school, all of that. But the final thing that we look for is there evidence of courage in their record? Because you can believe all the right things, you can mouth them, you can write a nice law review article that ticks all the boxes, right? But are you going to stand for it when it's difficult, when there's a cost to be paid? That, Jeff, has been one of the most difficult things to identify, courage. But we're getting better at that. And every time we go through this process, we try to learn lessons and improve our process to make sure that we're looking for people that when they get on the court, they're actually going to hold to the positions that we thought they would through our research.
So when you collect all of this data, you have a complete profile of a potential candidate. Who do you give this information to? Who's your target audience?
Well, great question. At the end of the day, the ultimate target audience is different from who we're targeting now. The ultimate target audience are the two officers or offices within the Constitution that ultimately make the decision on judicial appointments. Number one, that's the president. He nominates someone to the courts, whether it's the Supreme Court or the lower courts, but then that person goes through the U.S. Senate process and they have to be confirmed. So the other people that we're influencing are U.S. senators.
Okay.
But below that, how do we reach them? Well, we can make attempts to reach them directly. But the other thing that we do is we share this information. It's just free. It's almost like white paper. We give it to our allies. There are tons of groups out there that agree with us that are focused on many other things every day because that's their primary mission. But because we're allies and they respect AFA and the work that we do, they want this research. And then they want to be a part of the team and allies in influencing those ultimate decision makers, the president and the Senate.
I would think that there are a lot of senators who would welcome this kind of information because they have their own staffs, they're doing their own research, but especially for believers who are in the Senate,
Sure.
Am I right? Do they welcome?
Absolutely. They do. I mean, if they disagree with us, they're they're probably not going to welcome it. But we have a lot of senators that love our work and love our research, and they're very thankful that we're doing this. And I do want to mention this too, Jeff, because it's not just other organizations also. It's the listeners at AFA, because they're part of the grassroots team that's influencing their senators and people in the public. And I want to take this chance too to thank them, because we've been doing this work for 2.5 years and a lot of it is under the surface, but we couldn't do it without the funding and the sacrificial gifts of AFA's listeners and their supporters. So thank you guys that are listening.
Great point. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yep.
You have 3 categories in the Center for Judicial Renewal website: prospective, pending, and confirmed justices. What qualifies someone to be a prospective judge? Where do you go to get these candidates?
Sure. Well, there's not like some website out there that lists them. We go out and we'll look at sitting circuit court judges, for example, is a great place to look. People who already are on the federal bench at the level just below the Supreme Court. So we look at those folks. And then we also have tried to, because the Constitution doesn't say in order to be a Supreme Court justice, you have to have served as a circuit court judge. Okay. So we go beyond just circuit court judges. We might look at someone who is a state Supreme Court Chief Justice or someone who has been an attorney. And what we don't want to do is limit who we look for and then say, well, we can't find anybody that we think is great. If somebody else is out there and it's somewhat non-traditional, but we think they would be a great Supreme Court justice, then we're researching them as well, Jeff.
Let's look at where we are now in 2024. We have an election coming up very, very soon. The president is talking about making changes to the Supreme Court. There's a lot of things in motion right now. Are you overall optimistic about the future when it comes to appointing judges who understand what their role is?
I am. I'm more optimistic than I've ever been. And I would describe it this way, Jeff. I used to be a bit angry about the court, and somewhat for good reason. I mean, the things that they had done over the last 5 decades is horrible. Roe v. Wade alone
Yeah.
resulted in genocide of about 60 million babies. That's a big deal. But God did give me a different perspective on the court, and now I do view them according to the parable of the prodigal son.
Mm-hmm.
You remember the son? He was a son in his father's house. He had pretty bad attitude, went to a far country. But at one point, he came to his senses and he said, I'll go back to my father's house. And I picture the Supreme Court as that prodigal son who's on his way home. He's not there yet, but he's on his way home. And so I see so much at the court, Jeff, that encourages me that we're heading in the right direction. Now, are we there yet? No. And your listeners could probably right now cite 1 or 2 or 3 things that have disappointed them in the last 3 months, 6 months about the Supreme Court. And we would probably agree with them. The court's not there yet. But to answer your question, Jeff, yes, I believe they're heading in the right direction, and we need to keep working and keep praying. And I think we're going to see the court continue to improve.
Great word there. Philip Jauregui is our guest today. You can find out more about the Center for Judicial Renewal at afaaction.net. We encourage you to check that out. And also, our guest has hosted a video on everything that we've talked about today. It's called Principles of a Constitutional Judge, and it's available on our streaming platform, stream.afa.net. Philip Jauregui, thank you for joining us today on The Stand Radio and for your encouragement.
My pleasure. Thanks, Jeff.
And be sure and check out the article Restoring Justice in this month's The Stand magazine.